Today we'll be writing the domain and range of a continuous graph. We'll be writing intervals and using inequality symbols. We'll first look at how to write the domain or the x values of a continuous graph. To determine the domain, we'll be scanning the graph to include all the values on the graph from left to right. So, on number 1, here we have our lowest value. It appears to be -3. But when we see that there's an arrow here, that indicates that this graph is going to continue, and as it continues up, the x values are decreasing because this graph is going to go up and get wider and wider and wider. So our lowest value is -infinity. And so let's look at our highest value. It appears to be 3, but we see there's an arrow here again. So as this graph continues up, it's getting wider and wider to infinity. So our lowest value is -infinity, and our highest x value is infinity. So we can describe the domain of this graph as all real numbers. Our next example is a circle. So let's determine the lowest x value, which is right here. It's -1. That's the lowest x value, and it can be any value until here, our highest value, which is 5. So lowest is -1, highest is 5. So we would write it's -1 is less than or equal to x, which is less than or equal to 5. Number 3, we have array, and it appears that this is the lowest point, but again, we see there's an arrow here. So as the y values increases, the x's are going to decrease all the way to -infinity. And the highest point is here at -1. So the lowest point is -infinity, the highest point is -1. So the x's are less than or equal to -1. All right, in our final example for domain, the lowest value is right here at -3, and the x values increase all the way to infinity. So the lowest value is -3 and the highest value is infinity, so we would write that as x is greater than or equal to -3. All right, now we're going to write the range of a continuous graph, so we'll be looking at the y values, and we'll scan the graph to include all the values on the graph, moving from the bottom to the top. So we'll start at the bottom and move to the top. So on our first example here, here's the lowest value it appears, but again, we see there's an arrow, so that's going to continue decreasing to -infinity. Our highest point here, but it has an arrow, so it's going to continue to increase to infinity. So our range can be described as all real numbers because the y values go from -infinity to infinity. All right, our next graph is a circle, and here's our lowest y value, which is -2, and here's our highest y value, which is 4. So the range of this circle goes from -2, which is less than or equal to y, which is less than or equal to 4. Okay, the next example, again, we have array. This appears to be the lowest y value, but we see there's an arrow, so we know it's going to decrease to -infinity. And the highest it can be is right here at 2. So y is less than or equal to 2. And our final graph, this is the absolute value graph. Our lowest point is right here at 1, and it increases to infinity. So y is greater than or equal to 1.